I think that's right. Hello. Are we live? Oh, yeah. It looks. Let's. I'm just going to change one of them over, or not, because apparently that's. Oh, apparently that one's trying to. Okay, we'll do it from desktop audio. Okay, fine. There we go.
Hello.
Hi everybody. Look at that.
Gosh.
This is unexpected on a Tuesday.
Actually, yeah. Good grief. And I'm sober. Gosh.
Yeah.
There's a horrifying thought. Yeah. Looking at the first of the diaries I could find, and thinking about it, I don't think it was first session. I think it was a few things in. The first one I've actually got a date on.
Mm-hmm. But
it's the 26th of April, 2020. I think we actually started beginning of April.
Which proves that we've been going for 3 years.
Which is a little bit terrifying.
Yeah. And considering most people are like, oh, my D&D campaign lasted 6 months, it was amazing. We're here going, uh-huh.
This is fine. I mean, you've got to consider the circumstances that it all started in.
Mm.
It was lockdown. We were all going completely nuts, starved for contact with anyone. And we'd been using Discord to run little quizzes and to just chat, catch up and things like that. And Muggin's here put his hand up and said, well, we could do this. And you all went, oh, I don't know. Some of us haven't played it before, or we might have played one session, or this, that and the other. And you seemed to think that I was going to judge you for it, and it was just like, no, let's just give it a go. You know, if nothing else, it's a good excuse. And so I think, unlike a lot of things, apparently Mother Mafia can't hear anything.
I know, I just noticed that.
Yeah. But yeah, I think, just double check if that's all coming through before I continue this wonderful anecdote.
No, it's definitely
coming, else here?
It's definitely coming through.
Yeah, it's right. Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Yeah. So I think part of what helped us get onto the kind of the regularity, which I think is what a lot of sessions or a lot of groups find difficulty with, is that being in lockdown, we had nowhere else to be.
No.
So scheduling differences were really, really minor. It was only if we weren't feeling well or whatever, and we kind of adopted straight away this thing of, well, look, if someone's not feeling well, we'll just wait. It's not like it's going anywhere, and this is just for fun. It's not like a competitive ranked D&D or something like that. So it was very much that thing of, well, let's try it in, and there were a few people who I had DM'd before, so Mother Mafia, but also Mika and Evelyn. Yes, I was just trying to remember the making sure I was using the right name. Who at various points in various games I'd done a little bit with, but then the rest of you were totally, Kelly, I don't think had played anything if there had been like one session at all. Morgan had played maybe one, maybe two sessions. You played a lot, which was great because it meant there was someone I could lean on in the. Okay, let's give it a go. And I think the big thing for me was twofold. This is the first campaign that I've run as 5th edition.
Mm-hmm.
I was before then basically a 3.5, sort of mainly because I've just invested the time and the money in all the books, and it was that thing of, well, I'm not going to upgrade to 5 because I've got all the stuff I need. And it was really with having played a game with some people, one of whom I'd used to work with before they transitioned, and they introduced me to this concept of Discord, and well, actually in their case it was Teams that they were using, and D&D Beyond. So that got me used to the concept of here's actually how a Gen 5 game works, but also how the technology could help us to automate an awful lot. I mean, to be honest, with a lot of people who it's new, that's the really daunting, scary thing, is that I have all these dice and all these modifiers, and how do you go? Now, having started playing D&D back in Basic, the red box, which my father brought home from God knows where, back in the early 80s.
God, yeah.
and play through all the various things. A lot of those were very heavy in maths. Hey, anyone remember Thaco? Ah, there's that look. I mean, personally, I love Thaco. It was that sort of math nerd, roll the dice and this, that, and the other, and do a bit of subtraction. And yes, at the same time, switching to a positive number for stuff makes a hell of a lot more sense because that's your target number.
Yeah.
But I remember feeling a deep sense of grievance at having to abandon Thaco. Mostly, I think, because it meant I had to do on-the-fly conversions of of monsters from all the thousands of monster manuals I had. Because no. So, as Morgan said, we've been going so long that Morgan's changed pronouns twice. So
there is that.
and I think that's something that's going to write large in a lot of the kind of storyline from here. Not storyline, but the story of what we've been doing. So that kind of basis of learning the technology and working out what works in terms of do we try and use Roll20's built-in stuff, which I kind of said please don't.
Which is what we started with.
We started to, and it kind of stuttered, and I was fairly sure it was going to do that because previous games that I'd run. Actually, with my brothers and various friends, we'd done it purely through the Roll20 system, and it had creaked. I think is a fair description. It only worked, but an awful lot of the bandwidth would cut out. So, using another program to do that was an absolute godsend, and then sort of tying it all together with your streaming stuff as well to sort of be a bit of glue to hold it all together.
Well, you think when we started doing this, I was still new to streaming too, so
yeah,
it was all sort of we learned as we went along.
Yeah, all the techie skills kind of went, give it a go, see what works, and there you go. So that was one big factor, and a big thing that sort of, I think, got us all started. The other was that this is the first campaign. Yeah, no, the first campaign that I've run as explicitly queer, and especially the first campaign I've run. Now I'm choosing my words carefully. That I have run with people that I have known and who have known that I am queer.
Yeah.
Because I'm being very careful not to get into conversations about people I previously played with, and obviously we're not about outing people or not or anything around that. So this is the first campaign specifically where I had that in mind, and while it started with a very traditional structure in terms of here you are, a group of adventurers, and here's a thing, go and do it, and here's a dungeon, and it all got a little bit bogged down because it didn't quite gel with how we were playing and quite what everyone wanted. It was a start, and it got us used to doing the mechanics of things. And certainly looking at my notes here, I've 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got about 6 pages of notes on that first dungeon.
I'm just thinking if I can find. I think this is my first notebook.
Yeah, and my notes are very much what I would say traditional DM notes leading up to it. It's a case of very quickly. These are the rooms. Here's the treasures in it. Roughly note. I mean, the sort of stuff that now on D&D Beyond with its encounters mod, I just stick it all in there. But at this point, I was freehand writing everything, and then on like about the third page, I've got listings of what was going to happen as you emerged. Because the entire point of this was actually twofold: that there was here's a purely mechanical, go in there, do the thing of investigate and pull out what treasures you can for the university. What was also in there was the opportunity to introduce. Effectively, I was going to go with like a rival group. So the idea being that you and this other group from Moorgrave University, so to Winnon University for yourselves, would have this kind of recurring set of enemies who would level around the same sort of level, and you could end up being a thorn in each other's sides. So they might try and intercept things that you were doing. You might get wind of what they were doing and trying to intercept from them, and try and just have this kind of this growing, evolving thing going along. But but also to start to have an idea of something else going on in the background. Which is always something I love. I love doing. Pretty much every time I've done stuff, and I credit this absolutely to a really talented DM that I played with back at school, who was one of the first people I played with who was really quite traditional D&D. I mean, we're talking second edition version of Temple of Elemental Evil.
Yeah.
Okay, so real old school. Gary Gygax gets written, all those bits and pieces. Absolute dungeon crawl. But a big part of what they threw into there was hints of wider echoes of war, of other stuff happening in the background to just give a bit of context to stuff that was going on, and that really chimed with me as giving an idea of being in a living world. And so I wanted to do something on those sorts of lines, especially as for the kind of the description of the campaign under Roll20 was. And I'm not going to look it up now because I can't remember which screen I've got it on for starters. But essentially, something along the lines of the dust is now settling from the last war, and everything is up for grabs. But something from the past is reaching up out of that dust, reaching back. And this was this vague idea I had of fallout from the war, fallout from older history, and this idea of recurrence of patterns of cycles, which now I hope I'd like to think is becoming a lot more prevalent and really to the fore. This idea that stories keep repeating, that patterns keep happening, that the biggest thing we can do as part of what we do is to recognise those patterns and to choose whether to perpetuate them or to forge our own path. And a really early part of that was, for example, the storyline with Cole, where Cole, as a little sidebar, was investigating what had been happening to old members of his troops, of the troop that he'd been with as a scout, and finding essentially a cell of agitators from the Emerald Claw, who are. We haven't done a lot within this campaign, but I've done in others where they're a band cult who started in the armed forces of Karnath, which is a city that a state that embraces undeath, that has undead troops, which for the most part are now locked away in crypts and sort of kept. So basically, their standing armies are literally standing in a dark corner, but. A big part of the schism that took place towards the end of the last war was that the cult of the Emerald Claw were disavowed, because what they were looking to do was, rather than and I'm really, really broad brushing here, but rather than looking to find effective ways to raise and use and have their very devout populace be part, even death is not the end of duty, all that sort of thing, had turned more into a death cult. That was is aligned with the Blood of Vol, the Lich, who and a sneaky thing here is actually linked to the story of what happened to the Mark of Death disappearing. So and that's a really deep dive into some other stuff that's come up in the campaign. So that was so he'd found some agitators in that who were themselves looking to basically do a guerrilla warfare type thing and to start an uprising of undead within the heart of Aundair. Aundair and Karnath, relatively neighbouring states, huge issues, huge history of violence. And this is how this ended up with Cole being kidnapped and being used as an ad hoc power source for a Warforged Titan. A huge mobile engine of destruction, and you were able to find and to bring that to a halt, and just the emotional impact, I think, on all your faces.
I was going to say
as that wall got punched down, and there was Cole strapped literally into the heart of this thing.
Yeah, I remember that so clearly, and it was just the what, and that was just such a great moment that it is one of those that has stuck in my mind all this time. And it was the fighting off the zombies at the same time, and then it was just a great cinematic moment.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I've been trying to do, is to try and keep things fresh, and to sort of allow you all a little bit of rule of cool in terms of describing things, or if you're as we were here, Thorin headbutting through a wall in a different adventure. And a large amount of that is, I think, especially as we had the kind of the reset and the remove and that kind of real thing of we're going to focus on this being driven by you as a group. Part of that was a very conscious effort of, this has got to be fun.
Yeah.
This has got to be your stories. Yes, I have an underlying story, but actually being quite happy to let go of the story.
Just let it evolve naturally.
Yeah. And so to have to have no problem with there being whole sessions of let's have a game, let's have tug of war.
Yeah.
Doing these little standalone sessions within the wider campaign of it's a big fate, let's do these things. A little bit of silliness, and then sometimes just some quite serious stuff just in the background. Just as almost like sprinkling ingredients, just a little bit of seasoning. Let's just do that thing on there.
I think it was that first Summer Fate that we did that I remember the change of how the whole campaign felt, and like how it was going to be a lakeside adventure, and then we ended up with the Dream Lily and that sort of thing.
Yeah, the thing, sort of the ideas of that was, it was still kind of a little bit of a transition of sorts of the kind of the tone and the feel of these sorts of things, and yeah, I did a lot like most DMs. You make a hell of a lot up as you go along, and dear God, random note, I've literally just flicked past the Jumper of Love and a description of the Jumper of Love: black and grey striped, including the gloves of courage, the scarf of friendship, and the beanie hat of bravery. That first set of clothing knitted for Cole.
Oh yeah!
Wow! That's literally just in the. That's yeah, and that I think really sort of kind of was one of those sort of run with it, just go with it, and which is we're going with it. But yeah, but going on to that whole thing of that led to Kemsler and led to some of the other bits and pieces in that. Partly sort of was the whole. I still want to sort of give you some sort of sense of adventure, to give you a bit of experience, but also to give you a chance to take control and move yourselves. I've got my note here about that bloody alchemist. Bob Rancaster is dead. He's not happy, and now these cursed kids have been smashing his place up.
Yeah.
I thought totally inverting the whole Scooby-Doo gang trope. There was far more potential for comedy in that whole thing. In fact, yes, again, it gets the background of the Dream Lily and this and all that was kind of thrown out there, and then the comedy elements of sort of you finding this alchemist down in his basement. What happened? What happened to you? I had a bloody heart attack. What do you think?
I died.
Yeah. I haven't got time for that shit.
It was. I just remember that, and it was the realization that it was definitely that early on that queer coding of. We then realised that it was a gay couple rather than a man and a woman.
Yeah.
And it was the okay, that's great.
Here we go. And that's something I've tried to be very mindful of, is representation. You know, we all know how important it is. You know, the whole sort of. I think that the push by Wizards to consciously include more diversity in their materials has been helpful, but it's a fraction compared to bringing it into our games.
Yeah.
And especially as I think the most recent survey, for example, here in Surrey, the most recent census survey showed LGBT population as being around 3% of the adult population. Yeah. Obviously, it varies a little bit. Obviously, if you go down to Brighton, big percentage stuff like that.
I think Portsmouth was about the same.
Yeah.
And I think like near it was. I think they said like the university cities and that sort of thing were all much higher.
A younger.
Yeah.
Younger population. Yes. As Morgan just asked, that episode with that bit with Bob and the reference to Kemsler.
Yeah.
Yes, that was when Kaluma got high, which was which was a wonderful little go for it, and I think that I've not laughed so much.
It was the Kaluma getting high, Valenia aging 30 years in a split second, the ghost that was wandering around.
Yeah,
it was all that.
Gloriously gay chaos.
Yeah,
I think was the best description of what the fuck's going on. Don't know, but hang on a minute. Oh, we think we've got an idea. Oh, wait a minute. Whoa, oh, fuck! Quick, hit the damn thing. Oh, and the water.
That's what I was about to say. The water part.
Yes.
Can I use evaporate water?
Oh, it literally was. I'd got I just made a little note of little ghostly effects that there could be happening.
Yeah.
To give the idea of the creepy house, slightly spooky, you know, little noises off in the distance, you know, stuff like that. And one of these was literally the water faucet turns itself on.
Yeah.
And Kaluma creates destroy water. Well, going by read as written, I could have just said congratulations, water stops coming out. I thought it'd be far funnier to just do the okay, you have destroyed all the water in all the pipes, and just describe the absolute chaos of the water system within this house. Just suddenly, rather than being under pressure, just suddenly not being under any pressure whatsoever, and dust shooting out of all the faucets and everything else, and the rattling and the creaking and the pipe rupturing and.
I just remember that it was just the can I use destroy water, and I just remember your face of a. It was the DMs of, oh fuck.
It was. I have to say, not on my bingo card of reactions to a tap turning itself on. I was expecting at most oh guys look or something or. I mean, it was basically done as part of the general sort of tooltip of keeping you paranoid.
Yeah.
I was not expecting a Scooby-Doo slapstick destroy all the water. And I think that did more to set the tone of that and so much more the rest of that particular bit of the adventure than anything. And it's one of the things that I absolutely... and as Morgan says, Kaluma had enough, which means I was doing my job right. I was putting the fear of what the fuck's going on into the lot of you. I don't think anything's ever going to beat the whole carpet incident in that first dungeon.
It was
that haunted house came separate.
Third session by the time second session wasn't.
First or second session by the time you got down to that bit. You were moving really, really slowly through the dungeon.
Oh
that
god,
that dungeon should have been a one and done. Instead, you spent time sort of druid crafting flowers to grow out of walls, arranging the bodies of dead rats into dioramas. Just it was one of those. This is, I mean, okay, I'll yes. And the entire thing was, I haven't even written a rug down on the bloody thing. All it was I generated the map and just randomly thrown this down as an accessory on the map level as a bit of colour. Literally as a bit of colour on the map.
It was
And everyone fixated on it.
that session will forever.
Sky.
It's the fact.
I mean, that carpet is still in your house.
I know, and I'm pretty sure it's where the fucking mimic infestation came from. At this rate,
I'm saying nothing.
it's just. This is my first campaign.
But that's the joy of it, is that we've been able to embrace the whole range of experience for people coming into it. I've got
to say, for me, a conscious decision for me was with Valenia was taking a bit of a back seat so that I didn't overshadow the experiences of less experienced players, because it'd be quite. It would have been quite easy for me just to take command and just run with it.
Thing.
Yeah. Whereas I was like, right, I want other people to shine here, get to know what they're doing, and
have fun making mistakes.
Yeah, and like when I can see that things need to move along, that's when I do tend to sort of like hop in and do the thing. But it's the whole thing of I want everybody else to enjoy that first campaign to the extent that I remember experiencing that first campaign 25 years ago. No, longer than that. Like nearly 30 years.
I try not to think about
time is relative, as they say.
Anyway, 4 decades on plus.
I think my first campaign. My first game of D&D, I think, was 90, like either 92 or 95. Might have been 95.
Yeah, I think mine was something like 81, 82.
So,
because my dad had got a set, the basic D&D set. I think they started playing at the local Rotary Club or something. And he was a local priest, and I think he sort of got hold of it partly because this is all about the time the Satanic Panic was just started, because of all the weird reporting and the poor kids who went missing and got blamed on this and the other. It's over in the States, and there's a rabbit hole to go down into. It's looking at the early history of TSR and gaming and all. There's some lovely books by John Peterson that came out fairly recently. But I think part of that was being the person he was, that he wanted to actually have a look at it for himself.
Yeah.
And he was so scared and scarred by it that he immediately ran an adventure for me and the rest of the family, including my grandparents, my uncle and aunt. I was at the table. I don't think any of the other boys were, because they were all just that much little bit younger.
Yeah.
One of them hadn't even been born at that point. And it was literally just a one-off adventure in the back of the basic red box D&D book, little keep sort of thing. I played a first level wizard and died to a giant spider, and loved it. Absolutely loved it. I'd been holding off casting my one single magic missile spell with my 2 hit points, and a spider bit me, and that was it.
Yeah.
Admittedly, it was the final encounter of the whole thing. We'd managed to clear everything else, and I'd been throwing daggers and stuff.
I think the game 2 is playing for it then.
Yeah, that part of the course. So God, 42, 43 years on, I'm still playing and still sharing stories with my dad from time to time about weirdness we got up to. I mean, he reads the blog avidly, which is wonderful.
It's a fact. I remember sort of late 80s with White Dwarf. Like the Warhammer publication, like having D&D stuff in it back then, because it was a wargaming magazine. It wasn't just for Games Workshop.
That's right, and TSR had licensed out.
To
Games Workshop as basically the biggest supplier in the in UK for that market. So they worked really closely together.
It's that whole we stand Papa Lud. But yeah, it's that whole. It's one of those things that I definitely fell into. I want to say sort of by accident, but it was sort of an extension of like because I got into the wargaming and dungeon crawlers like Hero Quest, and then it just sort of evolved from there really. And
I played a little bit at prep school with friends, sort of like special events, things like that. But really, it was when I went away to boarding school, so secondary school equivalent, that I found my fellow weirdos. And there we were. I mean, these days it'd be very easy to sort of say, to point back and go, "Oh yes, there we are. There were the autistics, all the neurospices who didn't want to do sport. There we were, in various degrees of knowing who or what we were."
I feel incredibly attacked right now.
Yeah, join the club. And that led to God. During that time, we ran through the full Temple of Elemental Evil, Slavers, Giants, Demon Web Pit. We ran through that whole classic campaign.
Jesus.
We were meeting nearly every day. Nearly every afternoon for 5 years.
Which is impressive.
Yeah. The amount of trouble we got into for deliberately skipping sports, for hiding from official activities. No, this was it. This was far more important. This was D&D.
Yeah.
And it taught me more about maths and probability than anything else in the school curriculum. It taught me about problem solving, collaborative working, creative writing, textual analysis and understanding, all these essential skills that official schooling was technically also providing you the tools to do, but actually applying those literally on a daily basis in a collaborative, formative way was and remains still a hugely important set of skills that I use in my daily work every day.
This is the thing. D&D in school, I wasn't bad at maths. Don't get me wrong. But D&D definitely taught me that all the things that I didn't know I needed. And then it sort of pushed me further and further. And then it's that whole... I think D&D is the reason that I started liking English in school. Because I got to do my creative writing. I got to read all the time.
Yeah. I was very much the nerd who had the D&D books on my desk and would just open a book, crack a book open, and just read.
Yeah.
And I would not quite memorize, but it would be a case of, what was that rule? What's in here? What's this bit? Okay, let's have a look at the monsters. And think about how they could be used or how they could be countered.
Yeah.
Or how you could mix certain types in an encounter. Just really starting to think that sort of thing. Now, this was just as a player.
Yeah.
I wasn't DMing anything at all. But I was very much in that kind of sponge mode of absorbing how everyone else was doing, and encountering everything else like that. And bear in mind, this is between the ages of 12 and 18, so fairly formative years to be doing this sort of stuff. But I think that's where this whole idea of the power of the narrative, really kind of bedded in. And then obviously with Terry Pratchett going on about narrativium in his novels and various other bits and pieces, and just wider the rabbit hole went of down into kind of storytelling and myths and Neil Gaiman writing and Sandman and Alan Moore with all the magical writing.
It was that whole D&D Discworld, like the Sandman universe, and it all just sort of everything was all that
all feeds in, and it's one of the sort of I think you got all this kind of formative stuff in the background that then doing the kind of the hard graft with playing with the games and all the stuff that I played with my brothers and friends and stuff in the many years through university, and then a bit of a break because life, raising a family, stuff like that, and then coming back and doing more of it. Was and get other games in there and other different styles as well. But D&D was always the one to come back to. It was that kind of comfort food almost of playing in that fantasy sandbox and the community and the family that you build around that. Now, literally, I was playing with family, but by extension, the people we were playing with, of all ages and backgrounds, got absorbed into that. And in terms of the friendship circle, in terms of sort of, it's like my D&D group got invited to a first wedding. Half of them were ushers and things like that. So you can't underestimate that, and I think that's partly why I found that when we started doing things as a wider group, as the Polycule, it gelled so quickly because it tapped into that same type of connection as we tell stories together. As we bounce ideas off each other, as we take the mickey out of each other, and that's a big part of the humour, as far as I'm concerned, is that we all make mistakes, we all do dumb shit, and then we take the mickey out of each other, and then we move on to find the next thing, because it's somewhat very quickly it's going to be someone else's turn to make a fool of themselves. Whether that is, I don't know, Valenia falling asleep at an inopportune moment, or it's Kerner trying to charm a zombie, or it's Thorin headbutting his way through a wall to make to a secret door, and then you opening the door so it swings open with him still stuck to it.
Or Kaluma pouring their heart out to a gargoyle.
Yes, and that was brilliant role play. It was wonderful, and I was a little mean. I will admit I was a very little mean, because there hadn't originally been a fake gargoyle there, but the mischief in me just went, I've just to break the solemnity and the gravitas and just the soul pouring out that went on. I didn't want it to get too heavy, considering this was meant to be a heist, and so that's why I switched it out for it to be a statue, and then the gargoyle jumped from the roof down on it, and it was a fight. So that was mischievous, but also there was a purpose to it for switching and keeping it, making the action go. It's I think very much a hallmark of how I run things is that just at the back of my mind is just this little outlook of how can we make this funny.
Same.
How can we keep the mood changing? Because by having those contrasts from horror to joy to laughter to fear. If it was all one note, and we see this all the time in essays and people talking about filmmaking and writing, everything else like that. If it's all one note, you get numb. You don't get the impact. It's why you get the jump scare with a cat before the monster appears itself. It's that absolutely written right into the front of things, and I like to think that our adventures very much follow that model.
Before you think it's about to happen, and it's not what you think it is, and then that happens. It's that. Thank you.
Speaking of changes of tone, there's Morgan's comment. But then also sometimes the twist is no, there really is a twist. And one of the rewarding things for me is if I can throw in a twist that makes jaws drop. Or an intake of breath, or just a what. And sometimes that's little subtle things. It can be like the assassins on the train,
which was almost the end of Valenia.
So
very close.
Because I think a lot of stuff that we've done up until that point had been fairly mild level. They'd been
Mm.
relatively minor things, or if there'd been big fights, it was you were all together and it was kind of set pieces.
Yeah.
So suddenly to find yourself outmatched, yeah, that was that. I remember you all getting very, very serious very,
Mm.
very quickly.
It
Um,
it was the going from Valenia having the time of her life with the elven girl,
yeah,
and then suddenly
fighting for her life.
fighting for my life,
Hmm.
and and it, and even that was because of the way it was done, and it was the first proper time that Arwen had been with us as
Hmm.
well.
That's right.
And everything just sort of happened.
Yeah, and I think that train journey was,
Yeah,
I
what?
think for me, the beginning of the shift to um, the more mythic,
Yeah,
the high level. You'd kind of gone through you've started your adventure. You'd gone through the kind of the mid level of muddling along and getting a bit of a reputation, and yeah, you had your adventure in the swamps, and you were flying on the ships, and you'd met and avoided a dragon, and you'd fought the hags, and while that was sort of chase the MacGuffin type storytelling, it was setting a lot of kind of the
yeah,
ground, a lot of ground rule stuff for what was going on, a lot of the wider story, and introduced the Winter Night explicitly.
yeah. It was that.
But starting on that train journey back towards the Dwarven Kingdom was when I started taking the handbrake off.
It was the shift from like the city side of things,
Hmm.
and the very sunny, sort of great feeling, very ordered city to as we were progressing further into this area that things were getting darker, a lot more
Hmm.
bleak.
Yeah, it was that you were. I was very careful in the language I used, not to use winter aphorisms,
Yeah,
not to use not to talk about winter is coming, not to talk about the weather, the bleakness, but to do the tone setting and environmental storytelling.
yeah,
Talking about steerage, talking about what you saw as you were as you were safe approaching passage,
yeah,
and then the Great Walled City as well, that's sort of right on the border there, of seeing the armies mustered for the Silver Flame, of it being a little bit more of a melting pot and a little bit more spiky, for lack of a better
yeah. It's
word.
not so much not quite as polite society.
Yeah, very much that borders sort of liminal space of you're on a border, neither one thing or another. This great mix of things going on, and I remember hearing time and time again you just saying, "God, the party we get when we get to your gaffer better be worth it."
And
The number of
oh
times you said that to Thorin
yeah,
collectively, and by now I had in this book, or I think one of the other books now, I had started to throw ideas at the thing of, I knew there was, because I'd set it off with this seed of the father being unwell, summoning you back, um, and it was one of it was kind of that conscious starting to dig into your backstories. I've done a little bit with Kaluma, I've done a little bit with Kerner, but this was very much we're bringing Thorin to the
yeah,
forefront, because there was just so much richness of material there, and it tied in a lot to a lot of some of your other histories as well. So it seemed to be a good general sort of, we'll go with this and we'll see what comes up. And so I already had lined up that Dale Keir were going to be involved. I already had lined up that Karkana was going to be involved. So they were the two sort of core aspects. But the notes I've got on the nature of what was going on, he says, scrambling back through here, I have literally got pages upon pages upon pages scribbled out, swapped around, overwritten, doodled over, um, of different aspects of what could be going on. And for example, I had one thing where, for example, it would be almost like sort of option to have like a political thing where you have different wings of traditionalists, of sort of those sort of co-opted by Dalekeir, of those wanting to sort of keep the middle ground, and to sort of to give you an option of really roleplay heavy stuff, of working out which faction was going to need support or where the sources of conflict were going to be. And this is where you had the Silver Flame, because obviously there's these worrying reports of werewolves and other strange things afoot, sort of thing, where they could potentially either be an enemy or a really valuable ally. Just in terms of sort of, one of those things where, just sometimes and you've probably encountered this yourself when DMing, where you've set something up and you're thinking this is going to be a great and grand adventure, and they call out and say, right, we need to get the army in. And you're thinking, you've missed the point.
Yeah.
You've really missed the point. And you are meant to be the hero. You're meant to... Fine. So I thought, you know what? To forestall that, I will actually have an army on tap. And that's where the silver... That was the entire point of the Silver Flame was, should you go the route of, we need to go get help, we can't cope with this ourselves, we don't have the confidence...
They were.
There'd still been negotiations, but the Silver Flame as an army of, yes, harsh, but unequivocally good.
Yeah, that's...
were there. So that's why they were on the edge of the kingdom. They didn't come in, but they were there. But I also hyped up the whole scary aspect of this is a holy army.
Yeah.
And again, leaning in on the queerness of, let's face it, our experiences with religious factions and religious zealots and bigots, that this was a scary option.
Yeah. But
that's also playing to our own prejudices.
And I think that's why it works so well.
Yeah. Because that was kind of the twist of, yeah, they're religious, but actually, no. Because the response you got when you sorted it was, thank you.
Yeah.
We're here to help people, to support people, to look for people. You found a cure, brilliant. You've actually, you've avoided the strife and the bloodletting and everything else like that. And they're still around. They're still out there. And there's still that curiosity as to how you did it. Because you were so cagey that you wouldn't tell them. So they're still keeping an eye out.
But
because they're curious. Yeah.
But it was we prevented what could have possibly been a completely different plot hook.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And yeah,
and I think the big thing was with that was the minute I'm literally that first encounter of the werewolves. That came about because I was mucking about in Dungeon Alchemy. We'd only just got it. I made a map with a bridge and an abandoned temple full of spider webs, and I thought I needed something just to give this a kit. I know. Let's have it werewolves, and let's have it werewolves wearing the uniform of Clan Amberhammer Guards.
And I do remember that when that came out, I was just like, ooh.
But that was off the cuff. That was entirely off the cuff. And at that moment, the minute that happened, and the minute I saw the reaction, I scrapped the whole political storyline. I went, okay, no, we're going to go Dalekeir, overrun, this, that, and the other. And I was still working out the particulars of who or what was actually in charge of it, and Carcana was still very much involved in it. But now I was trying to work out, okay, well, what's actually the situation, which is why I then had to draw the map of the kingdom.
Yeah.
Why I had to draw the map of the hold, and as I'm drawing the map of the hold, working out what was going where, and making up little encounters, again using the D&D Beyond stuff. We're not sponsored by D&D Beyond, by the way. It's just an incredible tool. And them and Dungeon Alchemy are just tools that I use all the time, just to make my life easier. Just to be clear on that. So that was very much, I think, another hallmark of the adventure that we've had, where I have a generally really clear outline of the way I think this storyline is going. But because I'd embraced right at the beginning this whole thing of don't be afraid to let go.
Yeah,
that I've been able to do that, and so that sudden switch track of no, okay, we're not doing a political storyline, we're actually going to go into hardcore battle and horror, and really leaning in on this concept of a kingdom literally divided.
Yeah,
it could have gone either way.
This is I think the one thing I would say to like any DM that's running a long-term game is that don't be afraid to change your plans, because your players will make their own game.
Yeah.
They'll make their own story, and that's the whole point, is that it's all about everybody working in conjunction and steering it to places you don't expect it's going to go.
There's a reason it's called collaborative storytelling. I've got an idea of what's going on, but you also know your characters.
Yeah.
Better than I've got any hope of. I can make good, shrewd guesses as to how people are going to react to things, but that's all they are. Because how you, in your character, react to something is 3 parts the character that you've created to a part of your own personal experience. And your own fears, your own doubts, your own meta knowledge. And I make no bones that I very firmly play with metagaming to confound expectations, to keep things fresh and to keep things changing up. And so, for example, the minute I made that decision that this was going to be a fight for the soul of the Amberhammer hold and the lands, I wasn't sure which way any of you would jump with how you're going to it. Whether you and so you did the initial, okay, we'll go up to the hold, and it's all quiet, it's all that, and I think you all knew there was something creepy, something weird going on. And then you walk in and there's this enormous fuck off eye with an anti-magic sort of ray coming out of it, and all these deformed, mutated creatures crawling out of the woodwork, which you fought because they weren't particularly powerful things, but that anti-magic ray really buggered up your usual playbook. And you're creeping in and creeping in and creeping in, little bit of invisibility. Hey lads, it's all clear.
And that was the point. It was the playing it as much as Valenia is that seasoned technically seasoned adventurer. She's still dumb as shit. She's still absolutely. So that was completely up to like the way she would have done it.
Yeah.
And
just all your reactions as suddenly. I mean, I would have, if it was a style you wanted to adopt, of if you'd wanted to try and go like a room-to-room clearing and sort of circle around and take things out and do this kind of commando style, retake the hold, I'd have happily embraced that and gone with it. But the fact you literally stood in the middle of everything and kicked off this enormous fight, which have then started bringing in everything else, it just triggered absolutely everyone else. It was the first time that you've all run from a fight.
Yeah.
And I remember the very different feel that came into the session at that point of and of being hugely outmatched.
It was the fact that we realised that we were going to have to run, and the fact that Foreign was down. Who else was down? Was it Kaluma was down?
Yeah.
And it was that whole.
You had Arwen dragging unconscious Kerner behind them. You know.
It was that whole. This is serious.
Yeah.
And knowing that it could have been a TPK.
Yeah.
Had some of the roles not gone as we'd hoped, it could have been a TPK. No doubts about it.
Yeah. It's and I have no problem with TPK.
Yeah.
I'm a horrible person. But the thing is, and I've said this to you all collectively after the sessions, and I've said it publicly in a number of other times. I don't go out my way to try and kill you.
No.
I joke that it's a nice bonus, but I don't go out my way to, because this is about having fun. It's about telling a story, but importantly, it's about having fun. If you're not having fun, I'm just being a jerk. But if you put yourselves into a position where it all goes horribly wrong, but it's all your fault, then actually this is part of the story.
Yeah.
And there's a satisfaction and a telling of the tale that can happen out of that. Whether you survive and are then otherwise revived, or whether we then slip to effectively book 2, the next set of adventures come in to pick up the aftermath.
Yeah.
Which allows for all sorts of environmental storytelling and sort of all sorts of alternative angles and stuff. These are all sort of things that I'm quite happy to keep as open options, but it's not something I go with. I occasionally fudge rolls, but I don't often.
No.
I'll do something if it's a case of where there's something one thing after the other, and the dice are just being cruel. Then I'll lessen the impact a bit. I might do slightly less damage.
Yeah.
But that's about it.
I think as DMs you get a point where you know where to fudge rolls and where is a more, like, you can always do that whole what doesn't feel natural for a fight, if that makes sense. Yeah. So
sometimes stuff happens just left field, and it's just like, oh. But when I'm DMing and I'm on the screen, I don't normally have your video feeds up.
Yeah.
I'm normally going entirely what's on the map in front of me, the dice rolls. I'm flicking between tabs that have got descriptions of the encounter, of various rules I've got up on page if I just need to refer to them, number of tabs, I'm flicking between them.
Yeah.
And I'm purely going by the tones of your voices. And what I do is, if I start to hear certain stressor sounds in people's voices, I just quickly flick.
Yeah.
Because I keep Twitch in a separate browser. I use Chrome for Twitch, and I use Edge for all the game stuff.
Yeah.
So I've got deliberately a separate button. I just quickly either flick to it, or I just minimise my other screens just for a minute, just to do a quick once over.
Yeah, just
to look for signs of annoyance, of I think what I'm looking for particularly are indicators where people feel it isn't fair.
Yeah.
That's what I look for. If people think if people think that that the situation isn't fair, or the roles aren't being fair, or that I've gone over, because I'm always keeping a check on myself. It's really easy with a DM to really overestimate the capabilities of the characters, and then there's some unlucky dialogues and whatever. So and I've done it before. I've just totally lost it and just gone, oh shit, I wish I hadn't done that, sort of thing. So that's what I look out for. I listen for the kind of stressors, and I look particularly for those sorts of someone sort of having the that sort of thing, which is a really fine line.
Yeah.
But it's that thing of just have a quick look, and then I'll sort of flip back, and then I'll just sort of see how the dice rolls, take it from there. And sometimes all it takes is like a round, as we saw with the thing with the trolls at the forge.
Yeah.
To go from that real sense of oh god, what do we do? And it's hopeless, and then suddenly one round of action can make all the difference. To suddenly sway it from we're fucked to actually no, there's a chance. No, wait, hang on a minute. Quick, do the thing!
Yeah.
And it totally reversing. And those are wonderful fights to DM.
For me, I think the changing point was when I realised that I had the aspect of nature. And I was like, oh shit, I got something really, really powerful here that I haven't used before. And it was the whole reading, like, going through thinking, right, I need something that I don't normally do, and reading my character sheet and going, what can I do that I wouldn't normally do, that I've just got this for story purposes or for flair. And I went, actually, let's give this a go, because
Yeah.
it was
And it's something I do as a DM is I read your character sheets.
yeah.
I every now and then I'll just go just to remind myself of what you're doing, which is why sometimes there'll be some cryptic comment I'll make, which I hope to kind of spark someone to go and have a quick look back at their character sheet of, so that's sort of just my nice self coming through of nudge, by the way. So stuff like that. And as Morgan's put on the chat, there's a difference between stressed in character and being stressed and pissed off as a player, and that's absolutely the balance that I want to keep with you folk. You know, I've got no problem with stressing the characters out, but I love you all. I don't want you all to be pissed off and have a bad time, because that's shitty.
That's the thing. It's that fine line between fun stress or just stress.
Yeah.
And it's and like you say, it is a very fine line.
It's again, and it's like the difference between when it's like when I make people cry.
Yeah.
I don't go out intending to make people cry. But I also recognise that some of the writing that I do, and especially when it comes to, and it's usually the monologues.
Yeah.
I think because I act them a bit. It's usually the monologues that make people cry, or there's some sort of just little incidental thing where there's a personal connection, and I'll hear someone's voice crack, and I'll go, variously, didn't mean for that, but also yes.
Yeah,
you know,
it's
real ambivalent.
It's that little bit of sadist in you as a DM. That's
I'm not even a little bit. I'm unashamedly a sadist. There's no two ways about that.
I do it.
Yeah.
I think we all do it, especially when you know that you can push that line just that bit further. Yeah, I made Creepy Keith. You are right, I did make Creepy Keith. Who was just going to be a barman.
Yeah, and this is it. It's a little incidental characters, isn't it?
And it was the fact that Morgan's character was being super sexual, because Morgan is playing a incubus, succubus, concubus.
Oh yeah.
So
I've heard that.
So I decided to take it to the fact that how far can a concubus go? No, that's not my bag. That's not my bag. And it was the as they walked in, you know, this guy was giving Morgan's character a bit of the eye, and as they sat down, he just goes, they're nice boots. I bet you've got nice feet inside those as well. And it was that.
Yeah. I think stuff like that is also something that's quite can be something quite delicate in terms of in terms of sort of looking at what people are comfortable with, because yes, it's fun to sort of do stuff like the creepy stuff where it's consensual.
Yeah.
But as I said all the way through, yeah, your characters have got sex lives, and we've gone there, but it's always and draw the curtain.
Yeah. That's there. Yeah.
And I think that's appropriate, because this is an adult campaign in the sense of you are all adults, and so race age shenanigans aside, your characters are all adults, but adult doesn't mean it doesn't mean gratuitous sex, violence, and everything being fun state. So it is about exploring aspects. It is about consequences. It is about allowing ourselves the space to feel
Yeah,
and to explore, and not be afraid of being vulnerable, which is something that's quite difficult sometimes in a D&D space, because we're all playing heroic characters, and taking that adult space to be vulnerable and to feel emotions and to do the emotional side of the role playing is very difficult.
yeah,
And
that,
it's one of my great joys of this group is that people trust each other
yeah,
to be able to go there and to explore it, and to have to keep it on the fine line. Um, the I mean, we've had obviously sort of obviously the joking stuff with Kaluma and their relative age when it came to things like Iron Ryan, which was just absolutely worth it, because Mother Mafia was playing that absolutely to the hilt.
yeah,
Just a little bit of a twist, little bit of a
every
twist, little
time,
bit of a
yeah,
twist. No one wanted to say anything, and it was and then we had the whole issue with the sex club.
yeah. I think
And suddenly people working out, oh, hang on a minute, wait, what, and just that sort of dropping the bomb. No, they actually sort of are a
yeah,
very different sort of set of ages on these
and
things.
I think that's probably a good point for me to go. I need to go to the toilet, so we're going to take a quick break, and
Fair
we will
enough.
be right back.
I shall refresh my drinks and put the lights on.
So we'll see you in a moment, people.
In a sec.
And there we go. Hello, we're back. Look at that.
Hey, here we go. Oh, fantastic.
And thank you,
Wow.
Joe, for the biddies.
Very nice.
So, did you forget we were streaming?
Be known. Oh dear.
Just gonna try and turn my light on.
So yes, before the break, we were talking about judging tone.
Yeah.
And juggling that with the types of encounters and kind of stressing people out in a good way.
Yeah.
Which I think is the important part. And I'll just flicking through some of my older notes here, and it's quite nice to see that this isn't something that's just occurred in the moment.
Yeah.
I've actually got it written down. Elements like the wholesomeness of Valinia and her parents contrast to the dwarven material to come.
Yeah.
And that's just a little sort of sideways note on there when I was just sort of writing some bits and pieces. I think actually about the assassins, and yeah, it's back in the dwarven notes and stuff like that, all the political stuff. So it was literally just a throwaway mark. I've written it down and then forgotten and moved on. But it's obviously just hung around at the back of my head.
Yeah.
But yes, that whole split where you'd escaped and you sort of stopped to regroup. I thought that was a really pivotal moment because it was that was the point I effectively handed control of the direction of the story. You lot.
Yeah.
How do you want to do it? And so I had various things lined up, but I was very much in that. Let's just see what you do. And especially with the werewolf curse, which again was not a planned event at all. That was a classic example of the dice have said this is happening. So we ran with it, literally ran with it. How did that make you feel with regard to the wider stuff happening with the Dwarven Kingdom when that was happening?
For me, it made me realise that there was a lot more going on than just the ill king, and then it made me, and then it was the whole. It made the stakes feel a lot higher. That we could fail.
Yeah.
And that was quite a big. That was quite a big thing, and then of course, then that was also broken up with the Arwen squid vampires.
Yes. Yeah.
And the Kurda being thrown in and out of the basement.
Yeah.
It was that mix of the two, how serious this was, and that myself and Kaluma could technically kill the rest of the party. And then we had the comedy in there as well. And then there was that whole fighting to control ourselves so that we didn't hurt people that we loved.
Yeah. And that was a fun mechanic, and again came up with it on the fly. To basically give you the choice of either control the move or control the action.
Yeah.
But not both. And that seemed to work really, really well as a way of simulating that internal battle and control for yourself. I found that really satisfying as a mechanism, and it seemed to work for the storytelling as well.
As a player, it really worked because it gave you that sense of almost uselessness, but also that you still had a choice in what you were doing.
Yeah. And player agency is really important to me.
Yeah.
I've never liked railroading, and I think again going back to that whole thing of the game being fair is I'm always very very alert
Yeah.
to take it to the problems of taking away people's agency. There's nothing more frustrating, for example, than being hit by a hold spell.
Yeah.
You know,
or being like perma-held.
Yeah. And certainly, for example, one of the things I learned very early on as a good way of dealing with things like person, dominate, all these things that in theory take away agency, it's usually the fun way to do it is to give the new set of instructions to the player and say, do your best to try and kill your mates. Because let's face it, we all love a chance to have a good heel turn. And so that I find is a good way of sort of playing to that for the simulation in the effect of the game. Because again, you've got that tension of, I don't want to ruin this game for everyone else, but on the other hand, can I take Thorin down, sort of thing, you know?
Yeah, it's that, you know, do you continue to be the wholesome party, or do you go for the let's see what we can do?
Yeah. And for me, again, talking with the storyteller thematic side, that kind of struggle of what do you do, how do you do, what's going on, I think really came to a head with, well, the Carcana reveal.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the few moments where there's been just like a whole. I deliberately flicked to the screen to watch your reactions when I mentioned the baby.
And that was the. Wait, what?
Yeah. All of you just went.
It was the. Okay. It's like the stakes suddenly felt very real. That there was this new life that was completely innocent in all this, and we were considering not killing, murdering the parent.
Yeah. The whole concept of that bit of the story was around family. It was contrasting the found family of the group with natural family, and again, back to our whole queer agenda, that whole tension that comes between the two, where things may not necessarily be as we may wish. Now, I writ it large with werewolves. Not really much of a stretch, to be honest.
No.
If you look at it through a queer prism, and I think that was one of the great joys for me was actually you will literally come to a screeching halt to reevaluate what the hell to do next.
Yeah. And I think. Hey, thank you for the gifted sub. I know, subscribed. Sorry, I thought it said gifted. Hey, Ginge. I think it was that whole. Like, we knew, like, as queer people, we knew what being the outcast was like, and that's why it felt so sort of like, this doesn't feel right. And that I think that was the point, is that because it hit home, it made everybody go, ooh.
Yeah. Again, it was a real mood shift moment, and again it was that progression away from the light and the airy and the fun bit of chosen family with Cole and with Odif and all those aspects, and I didn't really have it kind of front and center of this is going to be an examination of queer families, but the themes are there and we read ourselves into them, and the opportunity was just too good not to give you at least the opportunity to play with it, because I think it was such a rich vein for all of us to go into, to explore in this gaming environment while still beating up monsters and
Yeah.
doing all these other bits and pieces. As you said, to raise the stakes for having that motivation, I think that for me is a really important thing. Is that, and I think again goes back to this whole real hatred of railroading. Is I try, when I'm writing the scenarios and the wider bits of the campaign, to always think about what's your motivation.
Mm-hmm.
What's the hook? You've got to care that you're doing this, because so many adventures take the easy hook of, well, here is your reward for going forth. Here is your monetary and also any of the loot you can have, and it's boring.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that way leads to murder hobos and all that aspect. Whereas doing something like this, where it's literally family to some of the group, and or the impact on you as the found family of that individual, because we've all supported peers and friends and lovers who have been at odds or have had some sort of conflict with their own family. We've literally all been there. It felt for this group a natural way to really get you to sink your teeth in and have that emotional resonance behind the decisions that you were making on what to do next, on how to reclaim the kingdom.
Yeah.
And then just to be really blatant with it, I then had, well, here's your two sides of the Dwarven Kingdom. Here are the refugees, and here are the werewolves. And again, you could have gone either way. You could have gone, let's just go forth and slaughter the werewolves, because they're aligned with whatever. But then you have this thing of, but wait, hang on a minute. Karkana's trying to train them and trying to wean them off, and there's actually this rebellion against this external influence, social media.
Yeah.
To actually sort of take this back and try and reconcile and try and sort of get control of the narrative. And I wasn't consciously thinking of the Delkir and the Zoriat lot as being social media, but the minute I've said it, it's just clicked as
it makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, God, I'll be accused of literature next. But you, as a group, made the really incredibly brave move to try and reconcile these two families, these two sides of the families, and I had no idea how this was going to work, and again, just gave everyone an opportunity to do a real rousing speech and get in there and be inspiring. And I think that was wonderful, because again, it's not a thing that we've done very much.
Yeah.
It's all been, I'll do this. And partly this is because so many of you are new players. And for example, one personal huge sense of achievement, and I'm gonna call them out on it because I think it's just such a wonderful change. This is Kelly's first ever game.
Yeah.
And Kelly has changed from being entirely my dwarf will do this, well, I guess I might do this, well, I guess I might say this, into stepping up and inhabiting the character.
Yeah.
And giving speeches in character.
And yeah,
they might be sarky little asides, but they're in character, and actually owning that and being there, and being comfortable in different ways and different types of combat, whatever, will step back and whatever. But that growth and that inhabiting of a character has been wonderful.
Yeah. It's been so nice to see it as well.
Yeah.
It's that whole thing of it. I remember Kelly saying that they weren't sure about role playing because they've never done it before, and then just watching that evolve over time, and the same with Morgan.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and all discovering who your characters are.
Yeah. Because
you've all started off with this vague idea, I'm going to do this, and then like Valenia was going to be the wild party girl, and then turned into the group mum.
It's just it's that sort of, these things happen.
Yeah. But I think, yeah, go on.
It's like the other character that I'm playing. I know playing in 2 games as a DM. That's unheard of. She was supposed to start off as this this completely like useless sorcerer, and the reason she had wild magic was because she couldn't control her magic properly.
Yeah.
And then eventually over the course of a couple of months, it evolved into the fact that she was actually a very skilled assassin who was putting on this front
Right.
to be undercover. And it was just very much that sort of evolution of a character again. And I think because I never wanted Valenia to be up front, like I said before, I just wanted her to be more a supporting character, so that I wasn't taking away. But as we've got more towards the end game, it's that whole thing of that she does have her moments. She is, becoming even more so than what she was before, and it's nice just sort of seeing where people are, and it's nice seeing, especially like the way Kerner's evolved as well.
Yeah,
and from this just books to actually enjoying life.
Yes.
And seeing a future. And it's just really nice. And what's funny is that Arwen has sort of taken up that spot, but at the same time, Arwen's character is slowly accepting that he has been absorbed into this group, and isn't quite just coming along for the ride.
Yeah,
but is actually quite a valued member of this entire group, and the fact that people in the hold come to him for spiritual advice, go to Kaluma for spiritual advice, and it's nice seeing that those interpersonal relationships just evolve as we've got, especially since we've got to the hold. Everything seems to have just been more.
Yeah, I didn't want the hold to be kind of some cold fortress.
Yeah.
Sort of team DDC's Fortress of Solitude sort of thing. I wanted it to be a living, or at least the illusion of a living household.
Yeah.
And hence the moving Newtown to the bottom of the steps, and the sort of the start of interactions coming with that. Some of the changing dynamics, sort of in the wider area coming through that. And again, yes, it's back to the circular idea of the building your own society, building your own friendships, building your own networks, all those aspects on that. And at the same time, with things like the library suddenly becoming a focal point of, it's not just that's a nice thing to have in a stronghold, but actually there might actually be something really important plot related going on here.
Yeah, it's gone from being that just sort of, that's pretty, to being this is where it's all happening now.
Yeah. And I think, especially when talking about sort of the move from Kerner in particular, but also Kaluma to a degree, of coming out from their cloistered origin, embracing life, and now they're needing to go back into the libraries and into the archives to actually find what's going on and to actually find a solution. And again, totally blatant about it. It's the circles. It's the stories coming back round. It's the playing with it goes around and what's going on. The biggest example, obviously, is Lord Benton and Thorin.
Yeah.
I mean that's the front and center. This is all a circular repeating pattern.
Yeah.
you've got this circular going from the trolls being ascendant, the dwarves being ascendant,
Yeah,
back
and
around
then
and round and
yeah,
round,
yeah,
ongoing the battle, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, which in the context of the seasons is winter versus summer.
yeah,
Okay, the trolls aligned with the Winter's Night now explicitly, but even just as written, trolls are effectively like the Wendigo. They're the spirit of hunger. They
yeah,
are there to consume and destroy, and nothing more. Um, whereas the dwarves, constructive, building society,
yeah,
building things up, and so that like that. And then you've got in the middle of that, you've got the auntie in the fields,
yeah,
who has been instrumental in that tearing down the trolls again and again and again, and being a corrosive influence on the dwarf,
yeah,
weakening the next generation again and again
and yeah,
and again. And the explicit upfront is the same relationship that is now being formed by Thorin and Deadeye Alice is what Lord Benton had
it's that same.
with that. It's that same slightly abusive relationship. And a big part of that is Lord Benton was a war hero.
Mm-hmm.
He is regarded as the hero who threw back the trolls, who settled the kingdom, could do no wrong. And now you found he was doing the bidding of a hag.
Yeah, and even on that, because Thorin is the folk hero of war.
That's right.
The
He is a war hero.
the dog of war that he, he was going from place to place, helping where he could, and now he is doing the bidding of a hag.
Yeah.
And
Very reluctantly and very suspiciously. But bit and large, that's what's going on. The whole fairy fae side of it is really baked in deeply on this one.
I think as far as I can remember, it pretty much has been all the way through. There's always been hints of fairy, fae, and there was that whole like mechanical beings part with the hags, all that sort of thing that was going on, and it was just that whole fairy tale feeling to it.
So I'm going to go back now to my notes from the very first bit of the campaign. And the grand thing within that temple that was the entire point.
Wasn't it a portal to Zoriat?
Oh, that was sort of there, but that was actually that was a red herring.
Okay.
Hidden in those ruins as a target that those forces, those weak forces of Zoriat, were trying to get to, was a certain egg.
Yes, I do remember you. Yeah.
Now the campaign reset before you found that egg, and that's why I had to go the route of the alchemist's house.
Yeah.
And you discovering the egg, and Shrieken being born, and imprinting on you, collectively as a group.
Yeah.
Bring that fairy reference right in at the very beginning. It was that important.
Yeah,
that Shrieken had to be rescued from that place of darkness. I'd even put in there a message from the gods to Kaluma of this spirit in darkness needing to be rescued and brought into the light. And what that was referring to was bringing Shrieken's egg out of that deserted temple
into the
light. Which didn't happen. So we then had to go sideways. So Shrieken wasn't a throwaway thing. It was the beginning of the telling of the fairy tale.
Mm.
And you did monologue at the gargoyle, but you've missed the entire point that Shrieken wasn't a throwaway character or thing for you to adopt. Shrieken has been essential, vital thematically to the whole campaign. And it's been light touch, but it's always been there just to have that little sense of anarchy, little sense of mischief, of playing the Lord of Misrule type thing.
Yeah.
Which is really important.
Like most Fae are portrayed.
That's right.
It's that whole...
This whole thing. And just get used to thinking in those terms. So then when you went to the Feywild, using the sort of the backtracks to get through to the hags, again, and it brought you into contact with the dragon. You got, again, and with the dragon and the hags, you've got these themes of corruption.
Yeah.
Of control. In this case, the dragon wanting control of his swamp back, and the hags, and the sort of the deal being done, but that whole sort of self-consuming aspect of that going on. And then you released the Winter Night, which was okay, I wasn't intending to bring him in just now, but okay, we'll run with it. So that brought that front and centre a bit quicker than I was expecting, but so that's why he kind of then faded back into the background again once you were back out into the wild. But to then bring you all the way to where you are now, where you have you've had the one interaction with the hags in the swamp, and again in terms of the circular, 3 hags you've defeated. There's another 3 hags here.
Yeah,
there's another coven. Those 3 hags connected to the Winter's Night. 3 hags connected to the Winter's Night.
Yeah.
So again, repeating large. Where you've got those strong aspects is that a lot of that was still relating to this idea of the narrativium, of the world, of the fairies being other and alien.
Yeah.
It is not a natural... It is not... In your native world, it is nothing... There is a logic, but it's not the logic you're expecting. It's the logic of stories, of fairy tales.
Yeah.
The path through the woods, don't leave the path. Into the blasted oaks, the plain of bones, the meeting place. All these are kind of iconic ideas I'm just bouncing in there just to set the tone of this is very otherworldly. And what I was really helped by was the Kevin Baker Eberron, Exploring Eberron and Chronicles of Eberron, which he goes into a lot more detail than the information that originally came out with 3.5 D&D and with the Eberron Rising from the Ruins book, where Thelanis is talked about, but not in a huge amount of detail.
Yeah.
The idea of the Feywild is deliberately kept loose in a lot of D&D stuff, so that it can be whatever the DM needs it to be.
Yeah.
What I really liked was Kevin Baker, when he started talking about Thelanis, explicitly talks about this concept of Thelanis being these pages of a book, these interleaved realms, and all that aspect of it, which reminded me of a relatively old, but going back about 8-9 years, Justice League story.
Oh, the fairy tale.
The fairy tale queen.
Yeah.
Coming out of a book, and all the stories coming out and being reinterpreted, and this, that, and the other, and people being drawn into and becoming part of that story.
Yeah.
So that's the external story kind of inspiration that linked in with what Kevin Baker was writing about, with the ideas of Terry Pratchett of the narrativium, and his witches and their use of narrativium to tell the story. So these are the thematic threads underlying where and how we've got to where we are now. But the twist, which I've talked about already in session, so this is lore that you know, is that you have creatures of the Fae who are basically stories coming into your real world.
Yeah.
And that's a dangerous thing because they're bringing their stories with them or proposing their stories, and
Yeah.
people getting pulled into them. And then you've got the story where the Winter's Knight is a mortal who has gone into fairy and has become a story.
Yeah, and has actually been absorbed by that.
That's right. And so all of the tragedy of this, all these horrendous things that are taking place, is technically, from a point of view, of someone being a victim of the fairy realm.
Yeah.
Technically. And I can't go into any more than that because that will be major spoilers for the materials you start to uncover
Yeah.
about who that person was. Might be again. And the reason I'm being vague on that is actually how you approach the problem and working towards that end game. Again, is in your hands.
Yeah, it's like
I've got ideas, and I think, well, this could work, or this could work, or this could work, and I've got various encounters plotted out, very broad brush stuff. But how you get to that is a way off because you've still got this immediate problem of the trolls.
Yeah.
Who are also part of this story. We've talked about them being the winter versus the summer, and then sort of trying to consume the spring so that summer never comes, so that the winter is eternal. It's fun to play with because it feels like it's elevating the humble troll into something a little bit more significant.
Yeah, it's the varieties of troll as well that we're coming across, and the way in which you're playing them out is that they've gone from being this annoyance to being quite a serious threat. And it's been such a long road so far that like there's parts that you go, shit, I forgot that happened. and then there's other times when you go that you remember it like it was last week.
Yeah.
And it's just very it's nice the way the whole thing has been unraveling.
Yeah. It's I'd say it's roughly I'd say 30% written and planned, 50% adopted on the fly, and then that remaining 20% is literally winged in the moment.
Which is pretty much I've said before, we DM very similarly with in that respect, and I think that's pretty much the same way I do it. Is that I have this end goal in mind. How you get there along the way doesn't matter, as long as you add the key points in along the way. It can go any way you want.
Yeah,
and it's
I kind of liken it to running a project.
Yeah.
Here are your milestones. How you actually get there is not quite so important as long as you hit the milestones.
Yeah, as long as it's done.
Yeah. Who does it? Don't care, as long as it's done, you know.
And I think on that note, it's almost a good time to finish. Because it's nearly 2 hours.
Yeah, I was going to say, we did initially build this as being an AMA. So have you got any quick questions you want to ask that you're almost frightened to have the answer to?
For me, I'm gonna say, ask you what's been your favourite point so far?
I think the thing I look back with the most fondness was the kind of the WrestleMania.
Yeah, that whole
which
yeah,
I I'd set that up entirely as I'd set up a whole lot of NPCs, blatantly modeled them after various
yeah,
WWE personality characters, but just it ran as a mostly social role-playing event, and then into a very rule of cool one-on-one combat, where literally I just got people I got Thorin to describe what he was doing, and then the skill attempts were how flashy you could make it.
yeah.
And it was a lovely free form thing. There's a couple of bits of information I wanted you folk to have. That was the entire thing.
Yeah.
It could have been done in 10 minutes. You've gone there, done a couple of skill rolls now. We turned it into a nearly 3-4 hour
Yeah, exactly.
session. And it was wonderful. It was great fun. Questions and thought, no, you can't level up.
And he's also put, what NPC have you enjoyed playing?
I think there's only really one that absolutely stands out that will make you, I think, just grin the minute I put the voice on. And it's that thing now. What type of meat would you like?
And
good old tangle finger.
I think that's the point. Is that we all love Tanglefinger and the way he is, and your rendition of a bogger is just fantastic. And it's not what anybody expected. Okay.
I just remembered that he's a fairy and he's born out of the fears of a lonely boy, and so that mischievousness and that's it, and the slightly creepiness, but the desire to please, but on his terms.
Yeah. A question for you both: what is one thing a DM does that instantly raises a red flag? Okay, for me, I think it would be too closely sticking to the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel that the rules, as they say in the book, are guidelines. And that I think if you stick too closely, you tend to sort of put yourself into a box. Or a DM that isn't willing to adapt and is just, this is a script. This is how it goes.
I was going to come in on that, and I've already mentioned this earlier. It's taking away players' agency.
Yeah.
We're all there to play a game together.
Mm-hmm.
It's not there to be the DM's ego trip.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute it's about, the minute it's about that it's not about fun for everyone, but it's about, and this can take many things, but I think there's some people who get very, words one order. I'm going on a lot about telling stories. I'm going a lot about the thematic stuff I throw in there, about this is the story I'm telling, the story that we are telling.
Yeah.
But as I've also said, I very much embrace right at the beginning of the case, and also let it go. Let go. Fling it out.
Yeah.
Literally, don't be afraid to let go and just let the players run off in a random direction. Because who knows what's going to happen, and you can always sort of skip it in other ways to bring it back.
As I always say, you make a plan. Your players go, nah, fuck that plan. So you write another plan, put that in your back pocket somewhere, and eventually that plan will come round, and then your players will still go, nah, I don't want that plan. And eventually, like I said, as long as you end up at the finish point or even somewhere near it,
that's people having fun.
Yeah.
But the minute a DM says you do this, you can't do that. This happened. You can't do. Not so much that you can't do that, because sometimes it is a.
Are you sure?
You don't have the capacity to do
it.
Well, no, sometimes it's just a case of you actually can't fly.
Yeah.
If you can find a way to fly.
Yeah. it's
we'll give it a go. But
it's
you can't. You're not Superman. You're not bang somebody 85 in there.
I've had especially with certain with other D&D groups, with not mentioning any trauma, like people having like 5 billion books in their bag that they just happen to have,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like
Yeah. There's an element there's an element where you can play fun with that, but you've got to set it up. So it can be that kind of here's your kind of your portable whole book of hand, but there's something weird about it where it will give a random book. But that's something I feel is something that you can build as an item that's earned.
Yeah.
Because it actually contributes to the character and the flavour of the campaign you're telling.
Yeah. It's okay. I'll give you one then. What is your favourite useless magic item?
God. There was a joke item in Dragon magazine on an April Fool's thing. So it isn't a canon thing, but it was a scroll of find hands.
I like
and
that.
The idea was that you opened the scroll, you read it, and you looked at the top and the bottom of the scroll, and there were your hands. The range was 0.
Yeah.
So I think that just tickled me when I read that, and that was that was sort of 86, 87.
Yeah, it's good.
Something like that. So it's very much of that era. In terms of current stuff, I think my favourite item that is generally useless, mostly because people are too scared, and also mainly because the potential for it to actually demolish any campaign, is the deck of many things.
Yeah, a deck of many things could. Yeah, deck of many things is just that whole how to derail your own campaign.
Yeah, I mean the great example of that was in I remember I'm flicking across Critical Role campaign 1.
Yeah,
right at the very end, they're literally doing the wind-up session. Or trying to do the wind-up session, and God goes out into a courtyard and pulls out dungeon.
Yeah,
and Matt Mercer's face just falls as Grog disappears from that plane of existence.
Yeah.
And he has to do we will hand wave this, but there is a grand and great sort of thing that happens off camera, so that by the end of it he's back in back in the world and stuff like that. And I think I haven't seen it, but I think there was then a thing they did as kind of a one shot where they actually did do.
Yeah, they did. It was between the two.
Yeah, but that isn't even the most egregious, weird thing that I've had happen. I think it was just a wonderful example of why I don't use it.
See, I would agree. Deck of many things, definitely one of those you go, I really want to add this in.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's the sort of thing that's useful for one shot. Sort of thing.
Yeah, thing is, when you've been DMing as long as we have, you do get that whole. You know what magic items not to put in to make your life easier.
Yeah.
But
still that temptation, but yeah.
For me, if we're going non-canon, I have to say, googly eyes. That you literally attach it to anything, and that thing becomes sentient.
Love it. Yeah,
and I love it.
Yeah,
it's one of my favourites. If you could create a character purely for shits and giggles, what would you create?
Oh God!
Thing is, you've all met Meatface, the Goblin Artificer, but I don't know, something like a barbarian sorcerer. Would just.
I mean, I'm literally scrolling through my D&D Beyond random shit I make up just to sort of see what combinations are, to sort of see if there's anything there that I've either made or that I think that there's one here that I've made. I haven't played, which I think, which I can't remember where he is. I can't remember what the name of it is now. He's around here somewhere. I'll find him in a minute. And it is. See, where is he? Where is he? Where is he? Where is he? He's that random. He's actually, I think, disappeared off my characters. But effectively, it's a fairy creature who is effectively a wild magic sorcerer.
See, the one fairy character that I've got is a circle of the spore barbarian,
Oof, God.
and it's just insane.
Yeah, I can't find. I may even have deleted the. Oh no, there he is. Melnick Tumblethwaite. He's a level 1 fairy sorcerer wild magic. Basically, who God only knows what's going to happen whenever he casts it. The other one, which I kind of want, which I do want to play because it is so weird, is actually one that's come out of the Spelljammer rules. Is a character called Sparrow, who is a plasmoid sorcerer of the aberrant mind.
Oh, nice.
I have no idea what it would, how it would play, but just that whole concept of being a living slime.
Yeah, I like the idea of plasmoids. I really do.
Yeah. It just, I like playing characters that are a little bit alien. Gosh, I wonder if that might be because I'm queer.
With that.
Odd that, my favourite ever character that I have played, and I really hope to play him again sometime, but the campaign he was in basically stopped, was Ashlick. Who, as of time of writing, as of time of broadcast, is a 7th level lizard folk cleric of the grave.
Oh God.
Who and this particular campaign he was in was a sort of pirate base, so Pirates of the Caribbean style. And his tribe was wiped out by undead, and part of his quest to sort of avenge / sort of stop it from happening from anyone else was he came to the kind of the pirate equivalent of Tortuga, found some other miscreants and sort of joined up with them because they seemed to be at the centre of all sorts of stuff going on. And his way of making absolutely positively sure that those slain by the party cannot come back is to take their bodies apart, butcher them, and don't ask what goes in the stew. There were a number of mornings where the party would come down to breakfast and find a cold cuts selection across the kitchen bar, which was delicious, but they were very careful to ask what cuts of meat had come from. Oh, that's haunch. That's and I would deliberately go out my way to not say
what it was,
what the animal was. The implication being that I had fed their enemies to them at some point, and the gumbo pot was always going. But he basically, as his downtime activity, took over the local pirates' graveyard and started to organise it, and started to. He sort of did a proper consecration and all these sorts of things, and taking care of the dead. But he also did it in the way of a charnel house, of disarticulating all the bones from the bodies. And having them all stacked like that. So it would be next to bloody impossible, without a great deal of effort, for someone to raise an undead army in the middle of the settlement. It would take some time. He was also a headhunter. So he would take the heads of anyone that they killed, because he was powerful enough to cast Speak with Dead. And he would so he would strip those off, and so he would have the various skulls in his hut. And then if they needed to do a bit of inquiry or a little bit of sort of a investigation, he could talk to people that they had killed, and he kept them very carefully labelled to see what they knew about what they were going into. And it was, but the joy of it was that he, as a lizard man, utterly alien mindset, totally literally cold-blooded, and no concept of once you're dead, you're dead. That's it. You don't need it anymore. Well, it might as well go to survive. It might as well go to sort of keep everyone else going. And his way of making magic potions was a set of enchantments where he takes some of the bones and he'd enchant them effectively with curing. So it was sort of a bit of a muck about with glyph of warding and a few other bits and pieces. It was a downtime activity.
Yeah.
That was kind of the hand waving we did with it. So depending on the size of the bones, the more powerful the heal effect. So for example, the equivalent of a standard first level cure light wounds would be, I don't know, sort of a finger bone.
Yeah.
Snap the finger bone, you get a cure light wounds. So it basically literally a reskin, and I use the word advisedly, of a potion of healing. But it was, here are body parts from people you've defeated, and you're now using them to cure you. And they were horrified until they were in the middle of a fight and needed healing, and he started throwing bones at them.
Yes. It's like being in a battle with oh my god, my brain's gone blank. With Arwen, and all of a sudden this fucking femur comes out of nowhere. So it's it's I think it's that playing stuff that you wouldn't normally play that is nice.
Yeah.
For me, one of my favourite NPCs is playing Rosie from our other campaign, who is very much a hello, dearie. How are you? Oh, we're going to stay in a little hovel over the summer holidays, and she's very much that sort of, but she's a kick-ass assassin.
Yeah.
And it's just so much. I just love role playing her because she's so easy to role play more than anything.
And I think there's a vibe there very similar to Rumpelstiltskin / Mr. Gold from Once Upon a Time.
Yeah.
Sort of, oh dearie.
Yeah, it's.
And how are you?
Yeah. Hello, dearie. And I think that would be quite. Actually, that's not a bad idea. Yeah, Mr. Gold. Yeah. But yeah, it's that whole. It's there's certain characters that you really get a feel for. And especially if you're playing someone different. Like one character I love playing for in the other campaign is Wolfram, who is very much a half human, half wolf.
Okay.
Not a werewolf, but they were cursed to be a wolf. And when the curse was lifted, it only half lifted.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And basically, he's the embodiment of ADHD. even as an adult, he sees friends. The one giveaway that he's happy to see is this whopping great tail just going back and forth.
He is the goodest boy.
Yeah, and it's just. He's just so much fun to play. And when I introduced him to the kids D&D, I actually gave myself a panic attack because the amount of hyperactivity in him. Because he's like, hi everybody, how are you? This is amazing. And it's just like, and it's just that whole sort of people don't expect.
There's that fear of how am I going to sustain this?
Yeah. And after 5 minutes, you are mentally exhausted just from. Yeah. But yeah,
it's a similar energy with Tanglefinger. It's that it takes me a minute to get the voice and the pitch up like that, but then it's incredibly easy to just fall back into it because you then start to sort of look and start to react to people on the screen and see what's making them smile even more nervously and thinking, well, let's see now what we can. And he's such now an easy one to get into.
Yeah.
And that's partly because being a bit neurospicy, keeping my hands busy is actually a good way of focusing. So actually having that mannerism, of him tangling the fingers while he's talking, and there's all the hunched over sort of posture that goes with it.
It's that dinosaur hands.
Starts to sort of get you to really inhabit him and not in that way behave. And it's
it's that whole, especially getting into a character. Like Morgan will tell you about when I when I was voicing Oberon,
Hmm.
and it was the whole standing up, the being big, the boomy voice,
Hmm.
and then half an hour later going, shit, I'm still stood up.
Yeah.
And going, I should really sit down. I'm not doing this character anymore. And then,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
yeah, and it's
Suddenly, oh dear God, I'm exhausted. Yeah.
and it's that whole inhabiting certain characters really does give you that push, and you finish and you're like, oh, well, that was
Yeah.
fun.
It can be quite difficult as a DM, especially if you're having to split your attention and change gears rapidly between
Yeah.
NPCs or
So-
between different things you're reacting to and things like that. And so that's why I don't often go very deep into character unless
Yeah.
it's something where we're really doing something that's quite intensive, because just that stress you can get from whiplashing from doing this to okay, roll initiative and and then someone else comes on and there's someone at the door, oh hello, I've come with your delivery, and it's that sort of, yeah, my vocal cords really hate me.
Yeah, it's definitely that whole. I remember one session I was doing voicing Oberon and my iteration of the Raven Queen at the same time, or like, and she's very soft and
Mhm.
and purposeful, whereas he's just there.
Yeah.
And you just like, and I remember at the end of that session just going, fuck, my brain just went.
Yeah.
It was just.
Yes.
So we said we were going to finish 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to
I
just go
think
there.
that's
Stop.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that's because we both enjoy our DMing and our storytelling and telling our stories.
Telling stories. Yeah.
It's that whole right. We need to stop.
I've really enjoyed this. This has been great. I'm certainly more than happy to at another point
Yeah.
do another one of these, because I think just the possibilities for manic questions from the floor, but also to sort of, I think, talk about some of the themes in more general terms about how we play and about where the genesis of ideas go together and some of that kind of craft aspect of how we make things. I think there's some really fun conversations we can have, and if we can do that and entertain people at the same time,
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm up for it.
It's definitely that whole thing, and I think I definitely in future, I definitely some point in the near future want to get together and do a whole, like, we can do it around the table game again, because it fit well. The last one was still during lockdown, so no, it wasn't.
We did one similar. We did the Christmas one, not last Christmas. Christmas before.
Yes,
the Unfamiliars.
Yes, we did in person.
The Unfamiliars crossover.
So that could be always be a good thing. So and I think on that note, as it is now 10:20, I know Tim has work in the morning. I I'm in work in the morning. Well, tomorrow at lunchtime. So yeah, I'm pretty sure we've got a game this weekend. That's for sure.
Yes.
I
hope so.
I feel like that kid with the crayons. Yeah, I did put off my other D&D game tonight, but I wanted to do this because it felt like something that needed to be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it was just.
Yeah, I think we tend to talk quite a bit after the end of session.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's checking in. Sometimes it's mental health check-in and tone checking and things like that. And sometimes I'll let slip little bits about sort of and partly that's me also sounding out whether stuff's landing or not.
Yeah.
But to actually kind of pull this together for a wider audience and sort of in a more wide-ranging sort of format has actually been really helpful, and it's given me some insight and stuff as well.
It also gives people an idea of like what goes on between behind the scenes between us all as well, as to how we all like see things, and I like that, because then people go, oh, actually this is quite nice, because it gives people a nice idea of what we're aiming for, rather than just, hey, this is a D&D game.
Yeah.
And
And
that's
also,
what...
we're not trying to be anyone else.
No.
I think that's a trap that a lot of people fall into, especially with real play. You know, we know the Dimension 20s, we know the Critical Roles, we know Ox Adventures, things like, which have all got their own unique, distinct
And
styles.
yeah, and I think
But
that's
we're not.
no. I think that's the point in general, is that although people say, "Oh, these are mercerisms," they're just DM things.
Hmm.
It's just how you DM, and you think Matt Mercer is between my age and your age.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's that whole, we are of that generation, we are of the same generation, so our DMing styles are going to be similar.
Yeah.
But we're not. But we're not them.
No, and there were ways of handling things that we each do in very different ways. And I can't remember who it was, but there's been a couple of people who sort of said, "Well, I like that," but these are professional actors.
Yeah. Like, I know whichever character I end up playing next, like say for our campaign or whatever, I'm gonna do a character that I can voice.
Yeah.
Whereas Valenia, I had this idea that she was going to be very orcish, but it ended up just being my voice, and it was just like, and it's one of and because this was actually the first. I said we were going to stop, and because this was actually my first campaign since transitioning, it was also that whole thing of trying to get into a new headspace, vocal pattern as well of, and that's the whole point of it, is that like we said, Morgan's changed pronouns twice in our campaign. You know,
Yeah.
You've got Morgan who's changed pronouns. We've got Joe that's changed pronouns. We've got Bunny that's changed pronouns. We've now got Moon. We've got me and you. And it's just like everything is. Yeah. It's that whole evolving.
We're all growing. We're all changing. We're all learning more about ourselves and being more comfortable with ourselves. And that, I think, is a thing of joy. And if you needed any quote to end a session on, I think that's probably a good one.
That is. Tim is the token cis person.
Yeah.
And I think that is the best thing to do. From your very tired Polycule, thank you very much for tonight. Thank you, Tim. It has been enlightening, and I hope everybody has enjoyed tonight. Those that have watched, if you're watching back, as we say each time, please enjoy. Please spread the cheer.
Yeah.
And we will see you Sunday for, well, that just happened. We'll be back Friday with the Guardian shenanigans, but until then, take your meds, stay hydrated, and get some sleep.
See you later, folks.
Good night, everybody. Where's my stop button gone? I do this every time.